We now have a new challenge, perhaps the most monumental in recorded history. The opportunity to investigate a phenomenon that could change our destiny. A look at ourselves 1,000 years in the future.
We're going to examine and perhaps question some widely held theories of what may have happened to this Earth of ours. We're going to investigate some strange and bizarre events in the present. Unbelievable happenings, as fresh as today's headlines. And more important, perhaps, we're going to take a searching and scientific look into the future. We're reaching more and more out into space. Perhaps, as we may learn, someone, something, somewhere in space is reaching out to us.
Who the visitors are, where they're from, and what they want is unknown.
Bigfoot was attracting national attention and was now rapidly becoming the most intriguing mystery on the North American continent.
Many people have seen ghosts and reported incredible experiences from the realm of the spirit world. Who can tell what this young man will see as he falls deep into a trance?
Welcome to After Dark Radio with your host, Bryan Alvarez.
And Lance Storm. What's going on, everybody? After Dark Radio, August 24th, 2013, figure4online.com/wrestlingobserver.com. Yes, Lance is here in studio. What's going on, Lance?
Not too much.
I know that one of the big criticisms of After Dark is that people call in and talk about wrestling. And I have put out a request for no wrestling talk here tonight, or at least limited. But Lance is on the show, and we haven't done a call-in show with Lance in a long time, so I suspect people are going to call about wrestling. So I will give them a brief period of time to ask you a quick question and then move on if they ask about it. But I will say, everybody, the show is open lines, and that's supposed to mean anything. We don't have call screeners here, so I'm not going to screen the wrestling calls. But in the future, if you call about wrestling, you may be axed very, very quickly. We'll see how it goes tonight. But Lance has got a list of reading materials here. I put those up on the front page as well, so hopefully a lot of you have read those and want to talk about that. And other than that, open lines, and I got some emails as well. And Lance is also going to talk about a meeting with a famous After Dark style celebrity when he was a youngster today. Isn't that right, Lance?
Absolutely.
Now, before we go any further, I just want to mention that a couple of weeks ago we had the story about the angel priest, the priest that showed up at the accident in Jefferson City, Missouri, and he allegedly showed up, and there were 80-something pictures taken of the scene, and no priest. He was never seen again. People were wondering who this guy was. The story obviously was that perhaps he was an angel. Turns out he has been found. He is named Reverend Patrick Dowling. This is from Fox News. The angel priest who appeared at the scene of a Missouri car crash, anointed and prayed with the teenage victim, then vanished, has been identified as Reverend Patrick Dowling of the Jefferson City Diocese. Press release provided to FoxNews.com said Father Dowling had been traveling Highway 19 between mass assignments in northern and central Missouri when he arrived near the crash scene. The arrival of the unidentified priest, who seemed to come out of nowhere, then attended to the victim before disappearing just as mysteriously, touched off nationwide speculation about the identity of the angelic cleric. He identified himself in a comment posting on a story about the actions. So, anyway, Lance, it was not an angel.
Imagine that.
Yeah. That sucks.
Not nearly as good of a story now that he's been found.
No. It was great that he was there. But yeah, he's not an angel. Now, before we get into the calls here, I'm probably going to start taking calls early, and then we'll go over some of this stuff later. But I guess sort of on the subject. Article that I sent you about an 8-year-old who never ages. And this child here, Gabby Williams, has the facial features and skin of a newborn. She is 8 years old. She weighs 11 pounds. According to gma.yahoo.com, she has a mysterious condition shared by only a handful of others in the world that slows her rate of aging. And obviously, they're looking at potentially finding a way to determine what it is that she has and how it could apply to us, an off switch to aging. So basically, you could You'd age until about age 20, 25, whatever you wanted, and then they'd turn it off, and you would essentially stay the same forever. Maybe not forever, but you would not get any older physically. Obviously, you could still get in a car wreck and die, or get the plague or whatever and pass away, but you would not die of old age. And Lance, I guess the question for you is, would you like to do this?
No, I think this is opening up a huge can of worms, not the least of which would be overpopulation. So I'm a firm believer in not messing with human nature, so to speak. But it's an interesting prospect of slowing or halting your aging process. But if people still want to have kids, we're just going to continually overpopulate the place.
Well, people will still die, you know.
Well, yes, but we would assume at a slower rate, although realistically speaking, it could create a whole new realm of germs and diseases and other things. Because our features aren't aging, things are still technically getting older. We could have a whole lot of other problems arise, especially if they only manage to turn off the developing process in some parts of our body. Perhaps your brain still ages, and then we'll all look like really great 20-year-old people with Alzheimer's running around.
That's right. And your neck, which is had some problems with your neck of late, that's not, well, I guess some of it probably is age-related, but most of that you suffered in the ring. So you would essentially have the body and physique and everything else of a 25-year-old with a screwed-up neck still. You're not going to prevent those kind of lingering injuries from getting worse.
Well, that's the thing, though. But what about all the other, parts that your body ages with? It isn't really part of the aging process. Just the cartilage in your knees, and the compression of discs and so forth from just standing upright in gravity. I'm assuming that's not going to be turned off by slowing down your aging process. So I think there's going to, if you could in fact do it, it's going to create more trouble than it's perhaps helping.
I don't know if it'd be good or bad, but I think a lot of people, as they get older and they realize that, all right, one of these days I'm going to croak. I think most people think that I hope that one day I go to bed and I don't wake up. You know what I mean? Nice, peaceful way to go. Just fall asleep. You had a good day, and you don't wake up. Never even know what happened. But if this occurred, and you could stop biological aging, and dying of old age no longer existed, you would know that at some point something terrible is going to happen to you.
You're going to die of
unavoidable
tragic accident eventually.
Yeah, you're either going to get in some horrifying accident that is so bad that you die, or you're going to get some horrible sickness so bad that you die.
And really, if the increase in population is a big result of this, higher population density does tend to lead to more crime, more violence. So yeah, the percentage of people dying from violent, horrible crimes would go up astronomically.
Yeah. What about if you got some sort of in some sort of terrible accident, but you didn't die, and you were in a bad state, and you were going to be in that state forever?
And really, when you think about it, if people stopped aging, advancements in wheelchairs and other such devices might decrease. So then if you suffered a terrible injury and needed some kind of medical procedure, again, handicapped aids, so to speak, they may not be in as much abundance because there's not a bunch of old people around needing canes and wheelchairs.
Well, you could also look at it like, let's say I'm in a horrible injury and I break my neck and I'm paralyzed. I mean, my guess is that at some point down the road, there will be a way to remedy this. So if I no longer aged, might be a long wait, but eventually I could be fixed if I wait long enough.
Oh, especially if they fix the aging process, then they could focus all of the medical advancements on repairing spinal columns, etc., and perhaps fixing all of the knee and disc issues I mentioned earlier from just being upright for long periods of time, walking on the earth.
So that article, all of these, by the way, that we're talking about, you can check out. I posted them at the front page of the website, WrestlingObserver.com. We're going to take phone calls and got some emails as well. And Lance, before we get to the first phone call here, the amazing Randy. You met this man, and I'm not talking to Randy Orton.
No, the amazing Randy. I'm actually not sure what his full name was. But yeah, he actually came to my hometown of North Bay, Ontario.
James Randy.
James Randy. There we go. When I was a little kid, and my dad is probably the only person more skeptical than me, and me obviously as a result of growing up raised by him. He loved James Randy because he was a skeptic and made a living proving fake psychics, etc., wrong. So when he came to my hometown, he did a straitjacket escape, hanging upside down from a crane by City Hall in North Bay, and then did a lecture or a show, magic show, if you will, up at the university, and we got tickets and went. And both my brother and I were selected out of the crowd to help with his demonstrations. I believe my brother was part of a spoon bending demonstration, and to be perfectly honest, I have no idea what I did. But I did get a signed photo by James Randy for taking part. And it was really interesting. And I remember, because, again, when I was a kid, I'm trying to remember what the show was. I think Kathy Lee Crosby was part of it. But they had, like, Uri Geller on and other... I don't think they had him on, but that he was the guy that James Randy became famous disproving. But they had people claiming to have psychic powers on the show. And James Randy, for those who don't know him, he had at the time it was $100,000 check that he would give to anyone that could prove they had psychic powers.
Yeah.
And he went around disproving people.
It's now $1 million.
It's now $1 million, yes. It's still there, although James Randy's no longer with us, I believe.
No, he's alive.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah.
He's just quite old now, I believe.
85.
There you go. That's not that old. Only a year older than Granny.
That's right. It was also amazing.
Yes. But, yeah, it's $1 million now, and no one's managed to collect it. And actually, I just recently read his book, Flim Flam, because I'm
trying to remember if I've read that book. I've heard of it. I'm not sure if I've read it yet.
To be honest, it's a bit outdated. I got it on the Kindle. It's quite dated at this point in time. But there's a novel series I read, Repairman Jack by F. Paul Wilson, which I actually get a mention in the one book. But there's one book that's he uses Flim Flam as reference material because there's psychics, if you will, in the book. And a lot of the scams and information in it he got from the book Flim Flam by the amazing Randy. So he was a really interesting guy, but he would do the magic tricks and so forth and then expose the tricks, if you will, because he was very open that these are illusions, not magic or the use of psychic powers.
I love this story from his Wikipedia. On Larry King Live, March 6, 2001, Larry King asked Sylvia Brown, who was a famous psychic, if she would take the $1 million challenge. She agreed. Randy appeared with her on Larry King Live on September 3rd, and she again accepted the challenge. However, she has since refused to be tested, and Randy keeps a clock on his website recording the number of weeks that have passed since she accepted the challenge without following through. That is awesome.
$1 million. I don't want it.
That's right. You know, they're doing I think it's Spike TV, they're doing a $10 million Sasquatch hunt.
Wow.
Yeah, they're putting together a bunch of teams, and if anybody can find accepted scientific proof of Bigfoot, they will be given $10 million.
So does it have to actually be a new species?
I guess. I mean, I presume so. You can't find like a bear.
Or could you find a really deformed bear?
That wouldn't count. You gotta find the new you gotta find a new species. But guess who's the insurance company is Lloyd's of London. How about that?
Ah, well, good luck with that.
That's right. Did you ever have Lloyd's of London insurance?
Personal insurance, no.
Yeah, about that. That was big in wrestling for a while before everyone got hurt and came back.
Yes. Kind of
ruined the deal for everybody else. Uri Geller. That's a blast from the past.
Yes, very old reference.
I remember when I was a kid, I did magic, and one of the tricks was you go to a place and you have everybody give you one of their keys, and you put the keys in your hand, and you do whatever, and you open your hand, and one of the keys is bent. And there was obviously a trick to it. But from that point forward, after I knew the trick, every time I saw like Uri Geller or whoever it was bend a spoon or whatever, I was like, this is bullshit. All right, to the phones. You are on After Dark Radio. Who is this and where are you calling from?
Hi, Brian and Lance. This is Sammy. I'm in New Jersey. I was the caller from Cairo from back when.
Sammy, what's up?
Not much. Here with my girlfriend. How are you doing, Lance? It's a pleasure to have you on the show, I guess, even though I'm not part of the show.
Doing fantastic.
What's happening?
I was reading the article about the children, well, the adult children and the 8-year-old who's like an infant.
Yes.
Get the video. I could see that being something that has a positive and negative. Obviously, like if I had like a genie, not obviously, but like if I had a genie and I had one wish, it'd be to basically be immortal and live forever and see how the rest of our existence turns out. Now, obviously, something like this, where if they found a way to suppress the gene and you could, like, they were saying you're not immortal, you could die from accidents, disease, but it's just the idea of something like that. It would be something I'm sure we'd all love, but I always think about, like, our growing population and if they were able to suppress aging and continue with medicine to fight all these diseases and stuff and minimize accidents with, like, new ways of driving and stuff. Like, New York as it is, like Manhattan, like, there's like 1 million people. You can't even drive because they're all crossing the street when the light turns green. Like, imagine if we, like, doubled or tripled our population because of something like this.
Well, the one thing I always thought was whenever people talk about evolution, evolution is not about things getting better. Evolution is about things surviving. And
I thought that was about H.
It is. It's all about the game. No, when you think about society and the world nowadays, it used to be survival of the fittest, obviously. But nowadays, especially if you have a way to stop people from dying of old age or whatever or just aging, just you're preventing aging. And nowadays there's people that have all sorts of illnesses and sicknesses, some of which they bring on themselves, and they can be kept alive for a long, long time. And it kind of makes you wonder where the human species is going to end up, because we're not necessarily going to be evolving in a positive direction. If I know this, I don't want this to sound like I'm advocating. You know what I mean? I can see how people will read this in a negative manner. I'm just saying it's kind of interesting that back in the day, if you did something stupid, you would die. But nowadays, you can do some stupid things and screw yourself up, and you just keep living. Does that make sense? Do I sound like a crazy person?
No, that sounds pretty normal, actually. We do a lot of things today that just, it's like, whatever. Like, I don't know, like, I don't know of food other than McDonald's at this point very often, and I'm still here, so that's like an example of some of the crazy stuff we do. But there's consequences for the bad things we do in other ways. Like if I keep eating this junk all the time, and I could die early, obviously. Even with, like, I don't know, like something like that. Like if we have that anti-aging gene, like could we sit there and eat, like butter all day and still be alive and healthy? I mean, how would that work?
Lance?
I don't think not aging is going to allow us to still not take care of our body and eat crap. I think I would think it would be even more important to eat nutritiously and so forth. I don't imagine you could live for 200 years, say, eating McDonald's. I'm not talking about the aging thing, but I'm just saying in general, like, okay, if you ate yourself to a grossly obese state 200 years ago, you might make it into your 40s, right? Oh, but now with all
now you're making it to the 70s and 80s, and what? I mean, the obesity explosion. I mean, what consequences is that going to have on humanity? I don't see these being positive consequences, right?
No, and I would look more at economical too, as far as a strain on the world and society in general too, in that you're going to have more and more people, and if we're living longer as well as not taking care of ourselves, we're going to have to work longer, which creates problems in the job market and everything else, because you can't retire at 65 if you're going to live to be 200.
That's true. If you live to be 200, you can't retire till you're about 190.
Yeah, which is going to be a hell of a job market with more and more people looking for work.
All right, back to the phones. You are on After Dark Radio. Who is this and where are you calling from?
Hey, Brian, this is Eric from Minnesota.
What's up, Eric?
Not much. Just what it is. Is Lance there with you?
Indeed he is.
Sweet. I got a question for you guys. I know once in a while I've been listening to Coast AM, and especially on Friday nights with their open lines. I think I got this theory from when somebody called in and talked to George Norrie, and wanted to get your guys' thoughts on it. I really don't believe it, but believe it. It's been probably about a month since I last heard this, but do you guys believe that there's a chance that like aliens and Bigfoot could be a different dimensional being?
A different dimensional being?
Yeah,
I would suspect Lance will say no.
You would be correct. I'm not really big on the multi-dimension theories.
Why not?
I tend to subscribe to Occam's razor, and I look for easier explanations.
So it's more likely this is a giant hairy ape in the woods,
or
that can't be found,
or a complete fabrication.
I guess there's that. What do you think about that, Eric? A fabrication?
Yeah, I believe that because I really don't believe in Bigfoot or aliens or anything like that.
All right, hold on a second, Eric. Let me ask Lance this question. I'm going to put him on the spot now. A fabrication, you say, Lance? Right?
As a possibility. I'm not saying that's my personal theory that I would bank money on, but that's certainly easier than a being from another dimension.
Okay, well, let me ask you this about squatching. So the San Juan Islands are around here, and on some of those islands, there have been Sasquatch sightings. Many of them, in fact.
Yes.
Whereas on other islands, there have been not one single solitary Squatch report. So if you presume that people are fabricating these stories, or they're full of it, why would there be no fabrications or crazy people on the islands where there have been zero reports?
Because if I was trying to convince you that I saw a Squatch, I would make up a story where there's been also other sightings. So if someone decided...
So not one guy...
One guy picks the first one, and the next guy that also wants to claim to have saw it will pick the place that someone else saw a Squatch. And then it just breeds that.
What do you think about that, Eric?
Well, perfectly makes sense. Another question about UFOs and Bigfoot. Do you guys think they could be they could be time travelers?
Time travelers?
Yeah.
I find it more likely that something could come from another dimension to our dimension than that we could go backwards in time. I don't buy that for a second.
Yeah, I have a hard time with the time. Now, again, you could get into some degree of suspended animation and so forth, and you could appear to travel forward in time.
You could go forward.
But you're not really going forward as much as you are just being suspended and waiting for the future to arrive, and then you can be wakened up, or whatever the appropriate term would be. But the jumping backwards and forwards in time, I think, is too much for my brain to wrap.
Yeah, not a. I don't think you can go backwards. I just don't think you can. I'm not a scientist or anything, but there are a lot of guys who work in physics. Michio Kaku, for one, he wrote Physics of the Impossible. And there was basically he took a lot of theories from science fiction, and there were various chapters like, here are science fiction ideas that will one day come to pass. Here are some that may come to pass. And here are some that will never come to pass. And in the never category, I think there were only two. One of them was time travel into the past, and I forget what the other one was. I think it was perpetual motion. I think those were the only two that he said would never, ever occur. The rest of them, he believes it at some point will probably come to pass.
Isn't being in orbit technically perpetual motion?
It's a good question. I guess. Maybe he's talking on the Earth. I don't know. I guess you would be... let me think about this. I'm going to have to Google that.
I've stumped you.
I have been completely stumped. Isn't... I just thought I could just type a sentence into Google and it'll hopefully answer.
As long as you're in a vacuum, it's...
Well, I would presume that they're talking about a let's see.
Oh. I've just been handed a definition of perpetual motion, which describes motion that continues indefinitely without any external source of energy, So being in orbit actually does have, because
well, you have to get it going.
You get it going, but then again, is it not the?
I don't know if okay. Here's my theory. I don't know if Jesus Christ. The moon, when it orbits around the Earth, all the moon is doing is falling forever. Does that really count as like motion? You know what I mean? Does it? I don't know.
I don't know.
I would not consider. I don't know. Can we get a scientist here on the air, not just me babbling like an idiot? Oh, here we go. Perpetual motion describes hypothetical machines that operate or produce useful work indefinitely, and more generally, hypothetical machines that produce more work or energy than they consume. So that would not be an orbiting body.
No.
All right.
And to tie it into wrestling real briefly, there was a Mr. Perpetual Motion, Richard Charlon, that wrestled in, I think he was based in IWA out of Montreal.
Mr. Perpetual Motion?
Yes, he always bounced back and forth from foot to foot, and he was Mr. Perpetual Motion, Richard Charlon.
Doesn't sound like he was, I'm missing the useful work part of this.
Yes, I'm assuming he didn't use a lot of holds.
Did he produce more work than he consumed?
I don't know. I don't have a lot of memories of it. I just remember the name.
It's a pretty good gimmick. We've got a tweet here, and I've completely lost it. Oh, ask Lance about Full House. Should I know something about this?
About Full House?
Yeah.
The TV show with Bob Saget?
Sure. Were you a fan? Is there something I should know about Full House? Am I missing something here?
I've seen the show before. Did not particularly care for it.
Good question, Jeremy. All right. How'd you enjoy Seattle today, by the way?
Loved Seattle today.
Yeah?
Although I did want to go back to what was the Strange Emporium that you liked down there?
Oh, no.
You don't remember what it was called?
God damn it. It's so late at night. Ye Old Curiosity Shop.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were there the last time we were in Seattle, and I found it very fascinating.
I found it fascinating that your wife doesn't want to go back, and she flat out said, I already saw the whale penis.
Yes. I think once you've seen a whale penis...
Exactly what she said.
Yes. I didn't even remember there was a whale penis there, but I remember there being a lot of curious objects, and I found it quite fascinating.
Yeah, there's a giant whale's oosic hanging from the ceiling. That's the scientific term.
Whale penis sounds better.
Yeah. I don't know. I was told the Ye Old Curiosity Shop moved, so I'm not exactly sure where it went.
Oh, that's curious.
It is. Now, I sent you an article as well, just for fun. 7 sci-fi, literary, and journalistic hoaxes that readers believed. I don't even know why I sent that one to you. I know you're a big fan of fiction. I guess the tie-in would be that some people really like science fiction, and I've never been into it. I've been into science fact, stuff that's actually real. And a lot of science fiction fans, I think, will say that, well, some of this could be real. And some of it, some of the stuff that used to be science fiction is now science fact. So it's fun to read and that sort of thing. Are you a big science fiction fan or just fiction?
I tend to prefer fiction to science fiction. Just that I like my stories moving along a little quicker. And I find with science fiction, not only do you have to introduce characters and plot, you have to introduce the entire setting. So I don't read a ton of science fiction, but I do read some. Although I did, when you sent me the hoax article, I found it interesting, the ones about life on the moon, etc. Yeah. Just that, again, most of these articles were, late 1800s. And I just found it interesting because the conspiracy of the moon landing, I always found it was interesting how many people thought it was a hoax. But when you start reading the articles on how many hoaxes there were, in the 1800s, I could see where people would start being more skeptical because things would be reported in the news or you would hear them because you didn't have the news outlets you do today or, Google as a means by which to look things up. So when you'd hear stories of things that happened in the world in the 1800s, you'd have to take them for read to a certain extent. And I could see after being fooled with numerous hoaxes over generations that you would grow up a lot more skeptical. And then in... I guess it was 1969 when they had landed on the moon. A lot of the people that grew up in the times that got caught with other hoaxes, they'd be more apt to believe it was a hoax and they didn't actually land on the moon.
Yeah, I think that journalism in the 19th century was very different from journalism today, first off. I don't think today you'd get away with just a preposterous story in the New York Times that you passed off as genuine. And I did the one thing. I realize we're not going to talk a lot about wrestling here, but I did have a wrestling tie-in that I had in my mind when they were talking about I guess it was the Great Moon hoax or whichever it was, and they were talking about how it was in the newspaper, and there were, I guess the New York Herald had done the story August 31st, 1835, and it talks about how there were people that read it and believed it, but most people thought it was bullshit. And it just kind of, it reminded me of, I think there are a lot of people that are of the belief that until like 1980, most wrestling fans thought it was real. And certainly in the, 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, people thought that, it was real. But really, I mean, you can go like all the way back. The 1880s at the very beginning, I mean, there were still a lot of people that did not believe for 1 second that these wrestling matches were real. And it's just kind of funny that as time went on, people got this impression that, oh man, these people in the late 1800s, early 1900s, I mean, they all thought it was real. But the reality is absolutely completely different.
Well, I don't think it is necessarily. I think the difference is that people wanted to believe, whether they be moon landing hoaxes, pro wrestling, Bigfoot, Area 51 for a foreshadowing for what we're going to be talking about in the near future, that people want to believe. And as long as they don't have irrefutable proof one way or the other, they enjoy it better because they want to believe. They want to have faith. They want to be able to talk and debate things. So even if you were, polling people, it's like, okay, you have to pick real or fake. Again, 99% of the population in 1980 probably would have said fake if they had to pick one or the other. But if they said they had to, bet their life savings that it's fake, they probably wouldn't have. Because, there's that little moment of doubt. And when I broke in, that's what I was told to protect the business. It's like there's that moment of doubt. That's what you have to preserve.
Sure.
And I think with, hoaxes with moon landings or whether it be 9/11 conspiracies, JFK, as long as you don't have 1,000% irrefutable proof, people really like the mystery.
I can understand like wanting to believe that there's a hairy ape in the woods, or wanting to believe that there's a monster in the lake, Loch Ness, or maybe even thinking that, okay, you know what? Maybe there was another guy that shot at JFK. Who knows? But the moon landing is so, like, the amount of work, the number of people that have to be involved for so many years, it's just like, that one to me is just like, that one's completely above and beyond. There's just no way to me. But we'll get to you in a second on the moon landing. I want to take this call. You're on After Dark Radio. Who is this and where are you calling from?
Hey, Brian. It's Eric in Chicago.
Eric, what's happening?
Not much, Brian. I have an After Dark subject I'd like to talk to you about. I believe you mentioned this once or twice on the show, but I'm a sufferer from sleep paralysis. And, yeah, I'm a little shaky. I'm already talking about it. You got to forgive me. I'm not a good, promo or anything, so if I'm stumbling over my words or whatever, But, basically, all my life I've had this, as far as I can remember. Now, they're very few and far between, so they're not it may be once or twice a year.
Sure.
Happen, but when I was younger.
How old are you right now, by the way?
I'm 22.
22, and you're still having them here and there.
Here and there. I probably had once or twice in the past year, but when I was younger, probably when I was 3, very young, still sleeping in the bed with my mother sporadically. Mm-hmm. I had one, and for those listening out there that may not know what this is, it's when you're in very deep sleep, and your body, what it does is it paralyzes you naturally. So when you're in a dreamlike state, so you don't act out your dreams, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, when you have this, sometimes you can hallucinate,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't move out of your body. Like if you try to move, you're basically stuck. So
and your eyes. Do you have the deal where your eyes are like half open?
yeah, a little bit. Like that's basically when the hallucinations kind of kick in a little bit.
Sure.
But when I was younger, this is what I remember. It was like two people standing on the side of the bed. And if you ever seen this movie, Invisible Man, where there's like this guy's invisible, he wears like a coat or whatever to cover himself. It's basically that guy, but with Christmas lights like wrapped around him.
Christmas lights?
Yeah, like kind of Christmas lights wrapped around them. And but they're invisible, right?
Yeah.
That's all you see. And there's another time where I was laying on my stomach this time, so I couldn't move as well. But then there was like something hovering behind me, which can only be described as like a mini Death Star, you know, like from
Sure.
Yeah.
Like the one that shot at Luke and he used his lightsaber. Remember that? The little one?
Like a little one hovering like behind me and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I'm so frightened, you know, as a child. I don't know what's going on. I'm shivering so bad. So that's how it wakes my mother up on the side of me, and she wakes me up. It still takes her like a minute or two to get out of the paralysis, but, you know, then that's another time. So then the most recent time, I actually had an astral flight. I rolled out my body because they tell you not to fight the paralysis because you'll never get out, right? Like, you can't move.
Never told me that. I kept fighting it.
I kept fighting it, too. So I kept fighting it, and one time I had it, and it was so bad, I was like, when I get out of this, I got to look up sleep paralysis because, like I told you, it was so few and far between and never, like, really bothered me until, like, most recently when I started having them, like, what is this? You know what I mean? So I looked it up. I did the old Bryan Alvarez Wikipedia, looked it up, and then I saw all the symptoms, and they said roll out of it. So I try to roll out of it next time, and basically kind of, like, flew out my window a little bit. And I was running so fast down the street. Now, this is, like, a little different from a dream because you're kind of up at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I was running so fast down the street that I was like kind of flying at this point. So this is when I noticed I was flying. I like got kind of returned to my body because I was like waking up a little bit.
So you actually left your body in this one?
Yeah, at this point.
Wow.
This most recent one. So I haven't had one since. This is why I'm kind of like a little eerie talking about it right now because I don't want it happening tonight.
Well, I want to thank you very much for the call. I have had the sleep paralysis, as I've talked about here on the show. I never left my body. I never saw anything. I just was asleep, and then all of a sudden I was awake, but I couldn't move, and it sucked. And you try really hard to move, and then all of a sudden, after a while, you can move, but it's like it's a battle to move. And Invisible Man with Christmas tree lights, not good. Lance?
Yeah, this is strange. I've never really heard much about this.
Never even heard. You never had it then, for sure.
No. Not a lot of interesting things happened to me in my life.
I had it. I haven't had a sleep paralysis like this in years. I don't know if maybe eventually you like grow out of it, or maybe I just don't sleep well anymore. I've been in deep sleep in 8 years. I don't know, but I used to have it not like regularly, but you know, once every few years. Sometimes even more than that. It sucks.
I think the only weird thing I ever had when I was a kid, more when I was ill, a lot of times when I was laying in bed, I don't know whether it was me and my bed would come like a long way off the ground or the ground would sort of fall away, where I felt like I was way up in the air, and it would freak me out. But I always just assumed it was like, again, a weird feeling, a trick in the eye because I was sick and my mind was playing tricks on me that I always knew in my head that I wasn't.
So you felt like you were floating?
Not that I was floating. I think, it's hard to remember exactly, but I think more that just the distance between the edge of my bed and the floor became really high. Whether my bed, I don't know whether my bed and I were floating or whether the ground was just getting further away. but I just felt like I was really high, which was very uncomfortable. And I was afraid of heights as a kid.
That's even worse.
Yeah, so I always sort of close my eyes and shake my head, and my eyes are playing tricks on me was more how I felt with it. And only when I was sick, I would have that happen. But I always sort of, in my head, fought logically with, okay, that's not really happening, just shake it off.
All right, back to the phones. You're on After Dark Radio. Who's this and where are you calling from? Going once. Going twice. All right, he's gone. I never had the feeling like my bed was up high in the air. Oh man, I can't even remember. I remember having like weird feelings, something kind of like that. I can't even remember what it was, and it was when I was really little. I'll try and think about it a little bit here. But when you mention that, it's like it starts to come back to me, but I can't even remember what it was. So.
Yeah, and it really was just sort of more that it was a great distance was created between me and the floor. It didn't even feel necessarily so much as height. Just sort of a distance thing, which was uncomfortable. And again, I always assumed it was being ill. Perhaps I had a fever and my brain wasn't functioning well.
If you were sick, that's probably pretty likely.
Mm-hmm.
All right, back to the phones. You're on the air. Who's this and where are you calling from?
Holy moly, I'm on the air.
You're on the air.
This is Matt from New Hampshire.
What's up, Matt?
Fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Awesome. Is Lance Storm okay?
Lance Storm is on the air right now.
Well, Lance, I see on Twitter that you have a shark. Is that a shark on your head?
Yes. Brian helped me get it off, though. So I'm no longer suffering from these shark attacks.
He was attacked.
I see that. Were there sci-fi cameras around to capture this glorious moment, or?
Just my iPhone.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
All right.
Unfortunately, no video. It was a mini Sharknado.
Yeah.
I see that. Well, guys, this is cool. It's really late here. It's almost 4 o'clock in the morning.
What the hell are you doing up?
Well, I kind of just woke up, decided to refresh the website real quick to see if the Lance Storm show was up so I could fall back asleep. Not that you put me to sleep.
It's just always nice to hear his soothing tones.
Absolutely. So I decided to call in and say hi. Lance, I did always want to ask you, because I know your opinion on gizmos in the world of wrestling, but I would love to know your opinion on medicinal marijuana as far as a medical standpoint goes.
I think the medicinal moniker is such a stretch 99 times out of 100. I know there's some legitimate, they've been dealing with glaucoma patients and so forth, but I think the majority of medicinal marijuana users, almost laugh when you ask them, what is the actual ailment for which you need this medicine? And
there's one right there.
Yeah. But even as anti-drug as I am, I don't have huge issues with somebody if they want to sit at home and smoke a little marijuana because it makes them feel better. I'm not going to freak out. There's bigger fish to fry.
Let me say one thing about marijuana, okay?
Good. I wanted to ask you too, Brian.
I just want to bring this up because I always laugh when and I'm not even people always say like it's just a plant. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it's poison ivy. Right? You want me to throw your ass in some poison ivy? It's just a plant.
Cyanide.
Yeah. If you want to defend your use of marijuana, you can defend that to me, and I will accept many defenses. But the one of it's just a plant, I think it's just idiotic. There's a lot of plants that I could ingest that would kill me.
I think the medicinal one I have a problem with, too, because I'm not a big medication person. Where you have ailments, you can go to the doctor and get a prescription for stuff. I'm pretty anti that, too. Just admit that you want it because you enjoy a buzz.
Yeah, someone just said, I want a little marijuana because it feels good when I smoke it. I'd be like, all right. Don't smoke it in here, but that's okay. That's kind of the way I look at it.
That's how I look at it, too. It's not legal here, so that's how I have to do it.
Yeah, around here, apparently it is.
I know, Washington State, man. I was reading an article last week about this bar somewhere in the Washington, or what is it? Washington? Yeah, it's Washington.
Yeah, it's Washington.
Washington and Colorado. Yeah,
Washington, Colorado, Washington State. Washington and Colorado. Sorry,
and Colorado,
All
Brian.
right.
Yes.
Go on.
But yeah, I was reading about this bar that was actually going out of business, or close to going out of business, and the resident, has started letting marijuana users come into their bar and having them, smoke there, and the business has gone up for them.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Strange times we live in.
Sure is. Well, I want to thank you very much for the call. I want to add just one more thing about weed. The one thing that really drives me crazy about weed being legalized to a degree here in Washington is that when people smoke it, it smells horrible. I absolutely hate the smell. And sometimes I'll be walking down the street and someone nearby will clearly be smoking. And I just hate that smell. Maybe it's just me. All right, Lance. So funny.
Just the thought of marijuana discussions.
It's coming to this here on this show. Hey, it's open lines. You know what I mean? Yep. So they
and just to be clear, it's my reassuring voice that puts him to sleep.
Of course, and the weed, I'm sure.
Yes, it wasn't a crack at me being boring.
This CIA acknowledging the existence of Area 51. I find this funny because this article is also on Fox News. I don't know why I got so many Fox News articles here today. But the article here includes a satellite photo of Area 51 that was taken like over a decade ago. Huh. But yeah, it's official now. In this article, there's absolutely no mention of aliens or UFOs. What do you think about Area 51, Lance?
I think it's funny that I would imagine there's going to be all of the conspiracy theorists from before that we're going to be, I told you! And they're going to assume that now means that Roswell was definitely an alien, and all of that stuff is in Area 51. They've confirmed it now. It's fact. Other than just that there is an Area 51 military base that they've tested flights or equipment or different things. They haven't really, at least from what I read in the article, confirmed a whole lot other than there is, in fact, a military Area 51. But I would imagine a lot of conspiracy theorists will be, okay, they've admitted part of it, which means the rest of it is true as well.
Well, one thing about it is that a lot of the Area 51 stories, a lot of people, they would drive down the road to the famous mailbox, which is as far as you can go on the road to Area 51 before the guys with the guns come and tell you to, hit the bricks. But they would go down there and they would see craft in the sky. And obviously, the idea behind Area 51 is they're not testing, Cessnas, not testing, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
This is top secret aircraft here. So, yeah, you'd probably see something kind of weird. You'd see something you couldn't explain. You'd see something that probably, maybe it went straight up. Maybe it did whatever. But, I'm sure they were testing some weird stuff out there. Do I think that it was necessarily something from another planet? No. And one other thing, I just want to mention this real quick about conspiracy theories. I think it's kind of funny that sometimes a conspiracy will require the government to be like kind of incredible. You know what I mean? Like the amount of work that would have had to go into NASA faking the moon landing. I mean, I've said this before. It would have been easier to go to the moon than actually fake the moon landing the way these people explain this hoaxed moon landing. Or all sorts of government conspiracy. I mean, people give the government a lot of credit. But at the same time, it's like, Area 51, these weird craft, they must be from another planet, because God knows our government could not come up with a craft that flew straight up in the air and then took off. That's ridiculous. The fact is, I'm sure they could, So, one thing with conspiracy theorists is they kind of want it both ways sometimes, The government is too stupid to actually pull this off. But this one, the government, I mean, they're just like above and beyond everything else to pull this thing off.
Yeah, they can't kayfabe dick pics, but they've managed to kayfabe Area 51.
That's what?
Anthony Weiner.
Oh. Like, what in the hell are you talking
What
about?
conspiracy theory is this?
Totally baffled.
Carlos Danger, come on now.
I don't need to hear any more about that.
Do you watch the news at all, Brian?
I do watch the news.
All right.
Not a lot, but I'm aware of things here and there. And finally, the other article that I sent you, unless I've forgotten one here, involves bringing extinct animals back to life.
Sort of.
Kind of. The mammoth, the woolly mammoth. What is it about wanting to bring back the mammoth? Is this something like, I don't know, like you have to have an elephant with hair? What is it about the mammoth, Lance?
I think because it was in the Flintstone cartoons.
Is that what it is?
That's my guess.
Like, of all the animals you want to bring back, the woolly mammoth?
Well, I guess if you mention dinosaurs, then they're just going to Jurassic Park you to death. So the woolly mammoth
yeah, but I'd
seems
like one
really
of those.
cool.
I'd like a dinosaur.
You'd like a dinosaur? Maybe the woolly mammoth is safer. Doesn't seem as threatening.
Maybe.
Or it might.
But what
also,
about a nice little herbivore?
Well, I think also too, perhaps the idea with the woolly mammoth is that because they're not really bringing back an extinct animal, they're genetically modifying DNA from the extinct animal to DNA of a similar animal now. So they're really technically creating a whole new species or a hybrid. But since the woolly mammoth is very similar to a dinosaur, an elephant, that if they can extract the DNA from, actually, was it just recently? I remember them finding a blood sample or something that they thought they could get DNA from, but and then do that with an elephant egg that they could make something close enough to a woolly mammoth. But I'm not sure what if you were going to bring back a pterodactyl or a T-Rex or something, what the current species you're going to breed this thing with to create this reincarnated species, if you will.
Komodo dragon?
A Komodo dragon and a T-Rex or a pterodactyl?
What do you think about going to the zoo tomorrow, by the way, speaking of the dragons? They have Komodo dragons at the Seattle Zoo.
Do they? I saw them at the Honolulu, or the Honolulu. Yeah, I guess it was Honolulu. They went to the zoo in Hawaii at Waikiki Beach, and they had Komodo dragons.
They're pretty sweet.
They're extremely dangerous, but they're neat.
Well, they're behind glass.
Well, yes, that helps. We don't want to go in and pet them.
Yeah.
But no, I've been to a lot of zoos. I was at the one in Hanover, Germany, the one in Australia, the one in Hawaii, the Calgary one, obviously, the Toronto one. I've been to a lot of zoos. I went to Louisville Zoo when I was in OVW. So I'm game for the Seattle Zoo. I don't think we're going to see any woolly mammoths, though.
No, but they do have elephants as well as jaguar cubs.
That'd be cool.
Jaguar cubs look just like your new kitten, just a lot bigger, and they'd eat you.
Or as they say in I think it's the South, the jaguar.
The jaguar?
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe we'll go to the zoo tomorrow and check those out. All right. Before we wrap it up here today, is there anything else you'd like to throw in? Any other weirdness going on in your life?
That's about the extent of my spiritual or multi-dimensional experiences. Although, just a plug, just because we did mention the Area 51. Boyd Morrison is an author that I've just recently found and read. He writes fiction, but he does stuff based on different after dark related topics, if you will. I just finished reading the Roswell conspiracy earlier this year, which had a Area 51 energy source from outer space based plot. He has a Loch Ness novel as well, which I plan to get to soon, and I think one based around not Noah's Ark, the Ark of the Covenant.
Ark of the Covenant.
Yes. So if you like after dark like science fiction, you might want to check out Boyd Morrison.
You know, that brings us full circle back to the beginning of the show when I was asking you about this. The Area 51, the Roswell conspiracy, the Ark of the Covenant. You know, there are real good books about this real stuff, Lance.
Yes.
You know, just might want to throw that in there. Graham Hancock wrote a book called The Sign and the Seal, where he went out on a quest to find the actual real-life Ark of the Covenant, and he believes he knows where it is. It's in Africa.
That narrows it down.
But the point is, wouldn't that be kind of cool to read about a guy looking for the real deal?
I'll wait till he finds it, and then I'll just
Well, he thinks he has, but he can't get in there.
Hopefully, he's narrowed it down more than just Africa.
No, he's got the actual building. Let me see if I can find where it is right here. But it's at a church in Africa. The Chapel of the Tablet at the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Axum allegedly houses the original Ark of the Covenant. Ethiopia. That's right. It's just a ghost. What the hell was that? Yeah, Ethiopia. Wouldn't that be a cool book, Lance?
Might be, yes.
Yeah, maybe I want to check that out. And there's a lot of good books about Roswell.
No doubt.
One of these days, maybe we'll take a trip down there.
There you go. Everyone's trying to get me to go to the convention in Vegas.
Yeah, forget the convention. Let's go to Roswell. You and me.
Be better than going to Ethiopia.
That is undoubtedly true. All right, everybody, we're going to wrap it up. This is a fun show. Should be back next week with a brand new show. I know these have been kind of here and there over the summer. There's been a lot of stuff going on this summer and a lot of stuff on Saturdays. And sometimes when there's stuff going on Saturdays, it's not the easiest thing staying up late on a Friday night. But thanks for everybody who participated. And thanks for everybody who called in. Thanks for everybody who downloaded and spreads the word about the show. Thanks, obviously, to Lance. And we'll have some stories from the zoo tomorrow when I toss Lance into the monkey cage, see what happens. And should be a fun time. So thanks again, everybody. And we shall talk to you again after a while.